Alright, moving on to the next part of the chapter, know your client, know your product, and suitability. So before we jump into this, I want you guys to be introduced to CFR, which is Client Focused Reforms. Now, what are these? So CSA, which is our Canadian Securities Administrators, released amendments or laws, okay, or laws to improve client-advisor relationship. Emphasis on putting clients' best interests first. So we are hearing this again and again, that in this mutual fund industry, clients' best interest is always put first before putting the advisor's interest. Okay, so what did CSA do? They released some laws, they released CFRs to improve client-advisor relationship, which has an emphasis on putting the client's best interest first. Now, the goals of CFRs, the first one aligns the interest of advisors and clients, improve client outcomes, and clarify client representative relationship. Now, what does that mean? So let's take a look at this little diagram here. So first one's aligning the client interest and advisor interest. It's this little part here. Now that's the trusted successful advisory. So aligning interest of advisors and clients, this will improve client outcomes and also clarify on client representative relationship. We'll learn more about all of this in the next few chapters, okay, but this is good introductions to CFR. Now, why is this necessary? Because of industry shift. The mutual fund industry has shifted from being transactional to advice and guidance. So instead of taking orders from the client, we have moved towards providing advice and guidance to the clients. Okay, there is a fundamental obligation to ensure suitability of investments, specifically that we are obliged to provide suitable investments and provide advice and guidance. Okay, instead of just taking orders like I want to buy this mutual fund, no, we are here to provide you advice and guidance, and we are obliged to make sure that that mutual fund or that investment is suitable for the client. Okay, now there are three key pillars for this industry. The first one is suitability, KYC, which is know your client, and know your product, KYP. We'll talk about all these three pillars in details now. Okay, so what is a KYC? KYC is understanding client needs and risk. Please remember, each client has a unique need and unique risk. Okay, we have KYP, which is knowing your product, knowing the investment fund, the mutual funds that you're offering. This can be achieved through thorough product knowledge. Okay, and when they meet together in this spot, we can assess the suitability, which is matching the clients with appropriate investments. Okay, understanding suitability. What does suitability means? So considering clients' unique situation. Sorry, it's a little cut off here, but considering clients' unique situation, understanding the client's circumstances. Now this is our KYC. Okay, and knowing your investment product, which is KYP. Okay, so when KYC and KYP meet, you get suitability, because you need to know your client and know your product, and thus you can make suitable investment recommendations. Okay, now what is a KYC? KYC means gathering essential financial information and understanding goals and commitments. Now KYC is different for each individual client. It cannot be a standard thing across the board. Okay, you need to gather essential financial information as well as understand the client's goals and commitments and what do they want to achieve from these investments. Okay, if handling client refusals, if client says no, if client refuses to provide you information, do not accept their order. Okay, because if you accept their order and it's not suitable, that may lead to legal consequences. So if client refuses to provide the necessary KYC details, you can refuse their order and thus preventing you from legal consequences. Okay, so there are 6 key aspects about KYC, which are known as KYC components. So here are the 6, but I'll focus more on our little chart here. That will help me explain you better. So the first one is personal circumstances. What does this involve? Client's age. Are clients young? Can they sustain longer time horizon for investments, or are they elder? Okay, if they're elder and nearing retirement, we don't have much time left. So that's a part of personal circumstances where you get to know more about the client. Financial circumstances, like how do they earn their income? Is it employment income? Is it self-employed income? So, and is the income stable? Does it fall under high income tax bracket or lower income tax bracket? So all those situations regarding their financial situation. Okay, the third one's investment need. What do they want to achieve from these investments? Are they looking for investing for their retirement? Okay, what's the goal? How much do they need when they retire? Okay, those are the important investment needs we need to know as advisors. Fourth one is investment knowledge. Now, this is not about you, this is KYC, this is about your client. Now, how would you rank their investment knowledge? The most important reason for knowing this part is because when a client is well educated in terms of investments, they can make smarter decisions. They understand the risks better, so they might be suitable for high risk products. Okay, but if they are a novice or they're very new to investments, maybe not. Maybe they don't understand the costs or the risk associated with investments with a specific mutual fund. So it's very important to know clients' investment knowledge. Fifth one is risk profile. Okay, how much risk are they willing to take? Are they a high risk individual or more like a low risk individual? Knowing this is very important. Sometimes there are other situations like personal financial investment knowledge may suggest that they are a high risk individual, but they might not be willing to take up that high risk. Okay, so there are 2 things. Okay, there's one's capacity to take on risk and willingness to take on risk. It is very important to know the latter, which is willingness to take on risk. Sixth one for KYC component is investment time horizon. How long are we planning to invest this funds? If it's short term, maybe it's not advisable to go into a high risk product. Okay, are they long term? Are they looking at 15-20 years from now for investments? So these are the 6 KYC components. You have to gather these information from the client in order to assess suitability for a right investment product. Okay, if they refuse to provide any one of the following 6 components, you should decline or you should say no. Okay, I cannot, dear Mr. or Mrs. Customer, I cannot take on your order for investment because we are here to provide advice and guidance, not just take orders. Okay, so that's KYC. Let's move on to the next part, which is KYP, or know your product. KYP involves understanding fund characteristics and knowing risks and costs. Okay, what is KYP? In literal terms, it's just knowing your product, knowing the mutual funds or knowing the investments you're offering. It is very important to have a thorough understanding of the investment product you're recommending, because if you don't know your product, how are you going to do the suitability assessment, right? So understanding fund characteristics have few different components. The first one's investment strategies. You need to understand if a specific mutual fund is more into stocks or more into bonds or cash or fixed income products. Asset allocation, if it's a balanced fund, how much portion is allocated towards fixed income securities, how much is allocated towards stocks. Historical performance, it's not just the best years, but both the best and the worst years. And over the usually most of the banks in Canada have a 10-year chart where they would show you the historical performance of a specific mutual fund or investment product for the last 10 years. So it is very important to know that. You have to know the best years and the worst years and what caused it. Okay. The next one's risks. Okay, what are the risks associated with the mutual fund? If it's fixed income, we have interest rate risk. If it's equity based mutual fund, then we have the risk of stocks falling down. All right, we'll know more about this in the future, but it is very important to understand the risk and costs. Okay, there's something called MER, which is management expense ratio, which is the cost of having a mutual fund. So that is very important to know your product and know your client so that you can do assess the suitability. Okay, so match investment risk with client KYC. Ensure appropriate recommendations to avoid unsuitable investment. So, in short, it's KYC plus KYP leads you to suitability. Okay, so understanding KYC and KYP, understanding KYC, KYP, and suitability is crucial for fulfilling your responsibilities in mutual fund sales and prioritize client needs and ethical practices. Now, this client needs, prioritizing client needs, is mentioned in CFRs, which is our client focused reforms. Now, client focused reforms were introduced by CSA, so it's very important to remember all these little details. Okay, so next one, the last piece of the chapter, we have role of mutual fund sales representative. So if you were to get licensed, what is your role in this industry? The first one is ensuring suitability. Okay, client needs assessment. This is achieved through KYC. Okay, and client investment matching, which is suitability. Okay, once you know KYC and KYP, you can ensure suitability, which means the correct investment matching based on their unique needs and circumstances. Okay, second one is educator and guide. You're an educator there. You're educating clients because many of the clients you would see in your everyday professional life might not be good with investments. Most of them are very new, or they don't understand how mutual fund industry itself work. What are mutual funds in general? So that's where you step in as an advisor, as an educator. Okay, so you're educating your clients, and then information documentation piece is where you're providing relevant documentation to your client regarding the risk, the costs associated with the investment. Okay, now keep this in mind that we are talking specifically about mutual funds, as this course focuses on mutual fund. Okay, the third portion is limits of your role. Because we are only talking about mutual funds, you can only focus on mutual funds because you're licensed in that specific area. Okay, if we are talking about individual stocks or hedge funds or stuff like that, there is something called CSC, which is another license to do investments as such, but this course specifically focuses only on mutual funds. Okay, and not even insurance. So let's say if a client walks in and is looking for options to talk about life insurance, okay, that's not your role. You would refer them to the correct expert who is licensed and who can make recommendations. And fourth piece is licensing requirements, which is passing this exam, acquiring necessary licenses in order to act as a mutual fund sales representative. Okay, so the last piece here is mutual fund sales in practice. Now, what this is an example of a mutual fund sales. Okay, the following scenario illustrates your role in practice, assuming a basic understanding of mutual fund. Imagine a client comes in seeking to invest for retirement. They express desire for growth, but you are unsure of the risk involved. But the clients are unsure of the risks involved. You would ask questions. Okay, you need to do KYC, which is gather details about their retirement goals, how much they can invest, their current financial situation, and how much risk they are comfortable taking. The second piece in mutual fund sales is educating the client. So explain the different types of mutual funds that are available. Talk about their best years, the worst years of performance. Talk about the risk associated. Talk about the cost involved with the mutual fund and how they align with the client's goal, which is how they align with KYC. So you really have to explain why it's a suitable option or a suitable investment opportunity that can be done through KYC and KYP. Which brings us to the next one, which is evaluate. So determine if a specific mutual funds fit their profile. If they are too aggressive, suggest more conservative option. We'll talk more about aggressive and conservative options. We have designated chapters for both of these types of mutual fund. But just know that you have to determine if a mutual fund fits their profile. Okay, and last but very important, last but not least, document. You have to take notes during your conversation to keep track of what was discussed and to support your recommendations. So always make sure that you document the proper, like you document the conversation and how you arrived at the decision of recommending a mutual fund, a specific mutual fund. Okay, this protects you in the event of conflict in future. Okay, because remember you are legally obliged to make a suitable investment recommendation, and when you have to keep a track of what was done to arrive at that conclusion. Okay, so here's a little chart. First one, ask questions, so which is gather clients' financial details. KYC, educate clients, so explain why you think this is a suitable option. Evaluate, assess fund suitability for the client, make them aware about the risk, the costs associated, and very important part, which is document, record the discussion and recommendations. And that's all for chapter 1. Thank you.